The sky above New Haven Colony was red, not the red of a sunset, not the red of a peaceful evening. It was the red of fire spreading across 1,000 homes, 1,000 lives, 1,000 futures that would never happen now. Captain Elena Reyes lay on the cold ground, blood soaking through her uniform. Her radio was broken. Half of it was melted from the heat of the explosion that had thrown her 50 feet from the command center. But somehow, the small emergency beacon on her wrist still worked. A tiny red light blinked, sending one last signal into space. She looked up at the burning sky and whispered the only words she had left. They knew, and they still let us die. Then the light in her eyes went dark. 10,000 light years away, on a quiet space station orbiting Earth, a young communications officer named David Chen sat at his desk, drinking his third cup of coffee of the night. It was supposed to be a boring shift. Nothing ever happened out here, not really. Earth had joined the Galactic Alliance 3 years ago, and since then, humanity had been living in what everyone called the golden age of peace. Then his console beeped. It was a distress signal. Weak, broken. Coming from New Haven Colony, a small human settlement on the edge of Alliance territory. David sat up straight. He tried to open a clean channel, but all he got was static and screaming. Then, for just 2 seconds, the video connected. He saw fire. He saw buildings collapsing. He saw people running. And then the signal died completely. David's hands were shaking as he pressed the emergency alert button. Within minutes, the entire station was awake. Officers ran through the halls. Lights flashed red. Someone shouted for the fleet commander. But something strange happened next. Something that David would never forget for the rest of his life. The Alliance Council, the group of alien leaders who were supposed to protect every member world, refused to send help. In the great meeting hall of the Alliance Council, high above the golden clouds of the planet Thranos, 5 alien leaders sat around a circular table. Each one represented a different species. The Vortak, tall insect-like beings with sharp claws. The Sela, small blue-skinned creatures known for their wisdom. The Crane, massive reptilian warriors. The Ashani, pale humanoids who could read emotions. And the Ulmir, ancient beings who almost never spoke. Earth's representative, Ambassador Marcus Webb, stood in the center of the room. His face was pale. His voice was shaking. New Haven Colony is under attack, he said. Thousands of human civilians are dying right now. We need the Alliance fleet to respond immediately. The Crane leader, General Doric, let out a low growl. This is not our concern. Not your concern? Marcus said, his voice rising. We are members of this alliance. You promised to protect every world under the Alliance flag. The Ashani leader, a woman named Vesa, looked at Marcus with something close to pity. The attackers are the Zarn Empire, she said quietly. They are far more powerful than us, Ambassador. If we send our fleet to protect one small human colony, we risk war with the Zarn. A war that could destroy everyone, not just humans. So you're just going to let them die? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Thousands of innocent people? The Sela leader spoke next, his voice calm and cold. Sacrifices must sometimes be made for the greater peace. Marcus stared at the 5 faces in front of him. None of them looked angry. None of them looked sad. They looked like they had already made this decision long before he walked into the room. You already knew, Marcus whispered. You knew this attack was coming, and you did nothing to warn us. Nobody answered him. That silence was answer enough. Back on the human fleet ship called the Endeavor, Fleet Commander James Cole received the news like a punch to the chest. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had spent 30 years serving humanity, first in Earth's own military and later in the Joint Alliance forces. He had never felt so much anger in his life. Set course for New Haven, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Full speed. His second-in-command, a young officer named Sarah Kim, looked at him nervously. Sir, the Alliance Council has not approved. I don't care what the Council approved, Cole said. Those are our people down there. The Endeavor, along with 3 smaller human ships, broke away from Alliance space and raced toward New Haven Colony. It took them 6 hours to arrive, 6 hours that felt like 6 years. When they finally reached New Haven, there was nothing left to save. The colony was gone. Where once there had been homes, schools, parks, and a small hospital, there was now only fire and smoke and broken metal. The Zarn Empire's ships had already left. They had done what they came to do, and they had left nothing behind. Commander Cole stood at the window of his ship looking down at the destruction. His hands were clenched into fists so tight that his knuckles turned white. "Survivors?" he asked quietly. Sarah Kim checked her scanner, her eyes filling with tears. "None, sir. We're picking up bodies, thousands of them." Cole closed his eyes. He thought about all the people who had lived on New Haven. Farmers, teachers, children, people who had left Earth to build a new life among the stars, trusting that the Alliance would keep them safe. They had been betrayed, not by an enemy, by their own allies. "Sir," Sarah said suddenly, "we found something. A data drive. It survived the attack." Cole took the small metal device from her hands. It looked ordinary, almost too ordinary for what it contained. He plugged it into the ship's main computer, and within seconds files began appearing on the screen. Reports, communications, secret messages between the Alliance Council and the Zarn Empire. Cole read through them slowly, his face growing paler with every line. The truth was worse than he had imagined. The Alliance Council had known about the Zarn attack 3 weeks before it happened. The Zarn Empire had demanded a peace offering from the Alliance, proof that the Alliance would not interfere in Zarn territory expansion, and the Council had agreed to let the Zarn destroy New Haven Colony as that proof. They had sacrificed an entire human colony to protect their own peace with a more powerful enemy. Cole read the last line of the document out loud, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "The human colony is expendable. Humanity is new to the Alliance and holds little political value. This sacrifice will secure peace with the Zarn Empire for the next 50 years. Nobody on the bridge said a word. The silence was heavy, filled with grief and disbelief, and something else. Something darker. Something that was just beginning to grow inside every human heart in that room. Anger. Cold, patient, unstoppable anger. Word of the betrayal spread through human space like wildfire. Within days, every human colony, every ship, every station knew the truth. The Alliance Council tried to control the story, tried to explain it away as a difficult decision made for the greater good. But it was too late. Humanity had seen the truth. Earth's Prime Minister, an elderly woman named Diane Okafor, addressed the entire human population in a broadcast that reached every corner of human space. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were full of pain. "For 3 years we trusted the Alliance," she said. "We believed that joining them meant protection, friendship, and a future among the stars. We were wrong. They saw us not as friends, but as tools, expendable pieces on their political chessboard." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "Today, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Alliance." The announcement shocked the galaxy. No species had ever left the Alliance before. Many alien leaders thought humans were making a foolish, emotional decision. Humanity was still young in space, still weak compared to the older empires. Leaving the Alliance meant leaving behind protection, trade, and technology sharing. But the humans didn't care anymore. They had learned a hard lesson. No one was going to protect them but themselves. Commander Cole stood before Fleet Command back on Earth, presenting the evidence from New Haven to a room full of military leaders and government officials. The mood in the room was heavy, filled with grief for the dead and fury at the betrayal. "We cannot rely on the Alliance," Cole said. "We cannot rely on anyone but ourselves. From this day forward, Earth needs its own fleet. A fleet strong enough that no one will ever again think humanity is expendable." An older general, a man named Richard Voss, stood up. "Commander, do you understand what you're asking for? Building a fleet that could stand against species who have been in space for thousands of years longer than us? It would take everything we have, every resource, every mind, every factory." Cole looked around the room at the faces of people who had lost friends, family, and colleagues in the attack on New Haven. "Then we give everything," he said, "because if we don't, this will happen again, and again, until there's nothing human left in this galaxy." There was a long silence. Then, one by one, the leaders in the room began to nod. That night, as Commander Cole walked alone through the halls of Fleet Command, he thought about the survivors' message they had found in the wreckage of New Haven. Captain Elena Reyes had died sending one final message before her beacon went dark. Her body had been recovered from the ashes, along with hundreds of others. Cole had read her file. She had been 29 years old. She had a younger brother back on Earth, and she had written him a letter every single week since she left for New Haven 3 years ago. He stopped at a window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Alliance Council was probably already forgetting about New Haven, moving on to their next political game. Somewhere out there, the Zarn Empire was probably celebrating their new peace deal. They didn't know yet. They didn't know what they had started. Cole pulled out a small device and recorded a short message, one that would be sent to every human colony, every human ship, and every human citizen across the galaxy. "My name is Fleet Commander James Cole," he said, his voice steady and cold. 3 weeks ago, our allies betrayed us. They sacrificed an entire colony of innocent people to protect their own peace, with an empire that sees us as nothing but insects to be crushed. He paused, thinking of Elena Reyes, and the thousands like her. We trusted them. We believed in peace. But peace built on lies is not peace at all. His eyes hardened. Today, Earth begins building the largest, strongest fleet this galaxy has ever seen. Not for conquest, not for revenge alone, but so that no one, human or alien, will ever again believe that humanity is weak enough to sacrifice. He looked directly into the camera, and for a moment his voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Send this message to Earth Command," he said. "We go to war." The message ended. Across human space, on every colony, every ship, every station, people watched that broadcast in silence. Then, slowly, quietly, something began to change. Grief turned into determination. Fear turned into resolve. Humanity had been broken. But broken things, when put back together, often become stronger than before. Far away on the golden world of Thranos, the Alliance Council received a strange report from their observers. Human shipyards across dozens of systems had suddenly gone dark. All external communication from human industrial worlds had stopped. "What are they doing?" the Crane General asked, confused. Nobody had an answer. They had no idea that in the silence, in the darkness of 1,000 hidden shipyards, humanity was beginning to build something the galaxy had never seen before. A fleet born not from ambition but from betrayal. A fleet that would soon make every empire in the galaxy remember one simple truth: never underestimate a species that has nothing left to lose. 1 year passed. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth had gone quiet. No diplomatic messages, no trade requests, no complaints, no threats. Nothing. It was as if humanity had simply disappeared into its own corner of space and stopped existing. The Alliance Council was pleased with this silence. They believed the humans were licking their wounds, mourning their dead, too weak and too small to do anything but hide. Some council members even laughed about it during their meetings. "The humans left in anger," said Vesa, the Ashani leader, during one council session. "But anger fades. Give them a few more years, and they will come crawling back, begging to rejoin the Alliance." The Crane General, Doruk, snorted. They were never worth much to begin with. One colony gone. It changes nothing. But far away, hidden behind the quiet, something enormous was happening. On Earth, in an underground facility beneath the mountains of what used to be called Colorado, Dr. Amara Singh stood in front of a massive holographic display. She was one of the top engineers in all of human history, the kind of mind that came along once in a generation. Before the betrayal, she had been working on peaceful projects. Better medicine, cleaner energy, faster transportation. Now she was building weapons. "Show me the latest simulation," she said to her assistant, a young engineer named Tomas Rivera. Thomas pressed a few buttons and the hologram changed. It showed a new kind of starship, sleek and dangerous, unlike anything humanity had built before. It was smaller than Alliance warships, but faster, much faster. And its weapon systems were designed using something completely new, a way of bending space itself to make attacks nearly impossible to dodge. "The bender drive is stable now," Tomas said, excitement in his voice. "We ran 200 simulations. Success rate is 94%. Amara studied the numbers carefully. 94% was good, but not good enough. Not when so much was at stake. "Keep working on it," she said. "We need it above 99 before we put a single pilot inside one of these ships." She turned and looked at a large photo on the wall of her office. It was a photo of New Haven Colony before the attack. Green fields, a small blue lake, children playing near a school. She kept it there to remind herself why she was doing this. Every sleepless night, every missed meal, every year away from her family. It was all for this. For them. Across Earth and its colonies, thousands of factories that used to build peaceful things, cars, appliances, farming equipment, had been converted almost overnight. Now they built warships, weapons, armor. Every skilled worker who could hold a tool was recruited. Every scientist who could solve a problem was called to serve. It was the largest mobilization in human history, bigger than any war Earth had ever fought against itself. Every single human colony, every single ship, every single mind was focused on one goal. Never again. In a shipyard orbiting Mars, General Richard Voss watched as the skeleton of a massive warship took shape before his eyes. It was going to be called the Vengeance, the first of Earth's new heavy battleships, 5 times larger than anything humanity had built before. Standing beside him was a young pilot named Marcus Reyes. Marcus was 23 years old, with dark hair and eyes that carried a weight far heavier than his age should allow. He had lost his older sister at New Haven Colony. Her name had been Elena Reyes, the very same captain whose last words had been broadcast to all of humanity. Marcus had watched that recording so many times he could recite it in his sleep. They knew, and they still let us die. Marcus had joined the pilot training program the very same week Earth left the Alliance. He had pushed himself harder than anyone else in his class, sometimes training until he collapsed from exhaustion. His instructors said he had a natural talent for flying, but Marcus knew the truth. It wasn't talent, it was rage, carefully controlled, turned into skill. "You ready for this?" General Voss asked him, watching the young man's face as he stared up at the massive ship. "I've been ready for a year, sir," Marcus said quietly. Voss studied him for a long moment. He saw so much of himself in this young pilot. The same fire, the same drive that came from losing someone you loved. Voss had lost his own son in a training accident many years ago, and he understood grief that turned into purpose. "Good," Voss said. "Because in 6 months you're going to be flying missions that no human has ever flown before." Not everyone believed the war fleet was a good idea. In the halls of Earth's government there were still voices of doubt. Ambassador Marcus Webb, who had once begged the Alliance Council for help, now sat in a quiet meeting room with Prime Minister Diane Okafor. "We're spending everything we have," Webb said, worry clear in his voice. "Every resource, every dollar, every worker. What if this war fleet isn't enough? What if we're walking into a fight we can't win?" Diane Okafor looked tired. She had aged years in the past 12 months, the weight of leading a grieving, angry species resting heavily on her shoulders. "Marcus," she said softly, "we are not building this fleet because we want to fight. We are building it because we no longer have a choice. The galaxy has shown us what happens to species who are weak. We will not be weak again." "And if it leads to more death? More loss?" Webb asked. Diane was quiet for a long moment. "It might," she admitted. "But the alternative is worse. The alternative is standing by, defenseless, while the next New Haven happens, and the one after that. We cannot let fear stop us from becoming strong enough to protect our own people." Webb had no answer to that. Deep down, he knew she was right. 6 months later, deep in an uncharted region of space near the edge of former Alliance territory, something strange happened. A small Alliance scout ship, operated by a curious Cella researcher named Knowles, was mapping star systems near human space. The Alliance had grown curious about the long silence from Earth, and small scout missions like this one had been sent quietly to check on human activity. Knowles guided his tiny ship closer to a system that Alliance records showed as an old, abandoned human mining colony. According to their maps, there should be nothing there but empty rocks and broken equipment. But his sensors picked up something else, energy signatures, massive ones. That's strange, Knowles muttered to himself, adjusting his instruments. This system should be empty. He moved his ship closer, curiosity overtaking caution. As he approached, his sensors began picking up more and more readings. Metal structures, shipyards, dozens of them hidden among the asteroid fields, camouflaged and silent. Knowles' eyes widened. This wasn't an abandoned mining colony. This was a massive, secret shipbuilding operation. He quickly began recording everything his sensors could capture, preparing to send the data back to the Alliance Council. But before he could complete the transmission, an alarm blared through his tiny ship. A shape appeared on his scanner. Fast. Too fast. It had come from nowhere, moving in a way that defied everything Knowles understood about ship propulsion. That's not possible, he whispered, staring at the readings. The shape was a human ship, small, sleek, and impossibly fast. It had detected his scout ship the moment he entered the system, and now it was closing in with terrifying speed. Knowles tried to activate his ship's cloaking field, the same technology that had let Alliance scouts move through space undetected for centuries. It made no difference. The human ship adjusted its course instantly, as if it could see straight through his cloak. "This is Alliance Scout Vessel 724, Knowles said into his radio, panic rising in his voice. "I am unarmed. I am not a threat. Please do not—" The transmission cut off. Back on the human shipyard, the pilot who had intercepted the scout ship removed his helmet and looked at the wreckage floating in space. It was Marcus Reyes, on his very first live combat mission. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This had been his first real fight, his first real test of everything he had trained for. "Target neutralized," he reported back to command. "Alliance scout ship, unarmed, but it had already begun transmitting data before I engaged." There was a pause on the other end of the radio. "Understood," came the response from General Voss. "Command wants to know, did the transmission complete?" Marcus checked his instruments. "Negative. I intercepted before the full data package could be sent. They got partial readings, nothing more." "Good work, Lieutenant," Voss said. "Return to base." As Marcus guided his ship back toward the hidden shipyard, he looked out at the vast structures around him. Dozens of warships under construction, more than he could count. A year ago, humanity had nothing but a handful of small patrol ships. Now, hidden in the dark corners of space, an armada was being born. He thought about his sister, about the message she had sent with her dying breath, about the promise every human being had made to themselves since that day. Never again. Back at the Alliance Council chambers on Thranos, the 5 leaders sat in confusion, staring at a partial broken data file that had been recovered from Knowles' ship before contact was lost completely. The images were blurry, incomplete, but unmistakable. Massive shipyards, warships larger than anything the Alliance possessed. And most disturbing of all, a small fighter ship that had appeared out of nowhere, moving faster than any scout vessel could track, striking with deadly precision before their observer could even react. "This cannot be accurate," said the Cella leader, staring at the images with wide eyes. "The humans do not have this kind of technology. They barely had basic warp drives when they joined the Alliance 3 years ago." "And yet," said Vesa quietly, "here is the proof in front of us." General Doric slammed his fist on the table, rattling the ancient wood. "Where is our scout? Knowles was supposed to report back hours ago." Nobody answered. Everyone in the room already suspected the truth. even if they didn't want to say it out loud. The human scout ship had been found, and it had been destroyed. Where did the humans go? Doric finally asked the room, his voice quieter now, filled with something that almost sounded like fear. Silence answered him, a silence that felt heavier than any words could have been. Far away on a small research station near the border of Zarn Empire territory, a lone scientist named Dr. Ewan Park worked late into the night, monitoring long-range sensors that few people ever paid attention to. Dr. Park had once been part of the Alliance's scientific division, studying deep space anomalies. But after Earth's withdrawal from the Alliance, he had quietly resigned from his position and taken a small, unnoticed job monitoring communications near the edge of Zarn space. Nobody knew that Dr. Park was actually still loyal to Earth. Nobody knew that every strange signal, every unusual movement, every whisper of information he found was being carefully recorded and sent through hidden channels back to human command. Tonight his sensors picked up something unusual. A message, encrypted but recognizable, moving through Zarn communication networks. It was a warning, sent from a Zarn research outpost near what used to be called New Haven Space. The message was simple, but its meaning sent a chill down Dr. Park's spine. Unknown vessel spotted near Sector 12. Speed and design do not match any known species. Recommend immediate investigation. Dr. Park stared at the message for a long time, his heart pounding. The Zarn Empire, the same empire that had destroyed New Haven Colony without mercy, had just encountered a human ship for the first time since the betrayal. And they had no idea what they were dealing with. Dr. Park quickly encoded a message and sent it back to Earth Command, his hands trembling with a strange mixture of fear and hope. "They're not hiding," he wrote. "They're hunting." The Zarn research outpost near Sector 12 was a small, quiet place. It monitored old mining routes and tracked minor trade traffic, passing through the outer edges of Zarn territory. Nothing important ever happened there. It was the kind of posting given to soldiers who had made mistakes or officers who were being punished. Commander Thrix, a large reptilian officer with green-scaled skin, hated this assignment. He had once led battle fleets in real combat. Now he spent his days watching empty space and filing boring reports. Tonight something changed. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "we have contact. Unknown vessel, Sector 12, bearing 340. Thrix walked over lazily, expecting another false alarm, another piece of space debris mistaken for a ship. But when he looked at the screen, he froze. The shape on the scanner was small. Fast. Moving in a pattern that made no sense according to any physics the Zarn understood. "Identify it," Thrix ordered. "I'm trying, sir, but it's not matching any database. Wait." The sensor officer's voice caught in his throat. "Sir, I'm reading multiple contacts now. 6, no, 12. They're all around us." Thrix felt his scales prickle with something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. "Sound the alarm," he said. "All hands to battle stations." But it was already too late. The human ships that surrounded the Zarn outpost that night were part of a fleet called Task Force Reckoning, commanded personally by Fleet Commander James Cole. After 18 months of secret preparation, humanity had finally chosen its first target. It wasn't a random target. It was the exact system where the Zarn Empire had launched their attack fleet against New Haven Colony 1 year earlier. Human intelligence, gathered secretly by loyal agents like Dr. Ewan Park, had confirmed that this outpost coordinated Zarn military movements in the entire border region. Commander Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance, watching the outpost on the main screen. Beside him stood Marcus Reyes, no longer a rookie pilot, but now a squadron leader, trusted with commanding 12 of the new fighter ships. "All squadrons in position, sir," Marcus reported. Cole nodded slowly. This was the moment humanity had been building toward for a year and a half. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every tear shed for New Haven, it all led to this moment. "Begin the attack," he said quietly. Inside the Zarn outpost, chaos erupted. Alarms blared through every hallway. Soldiers scrambled to their positions, most of them confused and unprepared. They had never faced a real battle before, not like this. Commander Thrix watched in horror as the human ships began their assault. It wasn't like anything he had trained for. The Zarn military had always fought using overwhelming numbers and heavy firepower, slow and steady, crushing enemies through sheer force. The humans fought differently. Their small fighter ships moved with impossible speed, weaving between defensive fire like they could predict every shot before it was fired. Larger human warships appeared from seemingly nowhere, using some kind of hidden propulsion system that Zarn sensors couldn't detect until the ships were already in firing range. "Return fire!" Thrix shouted. "All weapons, fire at will!" The Zarn defense cannons roared to life, filling space with bright streaks of energy. But the human ships simply weren't where the shots expected them to be. Marcus Reyes led his squadron through the chaos with practiced precision, guiding his pilots in patterns they had trained for months to perfect. "Squadron Alpha, target the shield generators," Marcus ordered through his comm. "Squadron Beta, take out their communication array. Nobody calls for help tonight." The human fighters split into two groups, moving with terrifying coordination. Within minutes, the outpost's outer shields flickered and died. Its communication tower exploded into fragments of metal and fire. Thrix stared at his monitors in disbelief. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre, and his forces were on the losing side. On the Vengeance, Commander Cole watched the battle unfold with a grim expression. This wasn't about revenge alone. Not anymore. This was about sending a message to every empire, every alliance, every species in the galaxy who had ever thought humanity was weak. "Status report," Cole said. "Outpost shields are down," reported his tactical officer. "Their defense fleet has lost 60% of its ships. They're requesting a ceasefire, sir." Cole's jaw tightened. He thought about Elena Reyes, about the thousands of names on the memorial wall back on Earth, about every family that had lost someone at New Haven. "Do we accept?" the officer asked. Cole was silent for a long moment. Around him, the crew of the Vengeance waited, watching their commander closely. This decision would define what kind of species humanity would become in this new chapter of its history. "Send this message to the outpost commander," Cole finally said. "Tell him this. New Haven asked for mercy too. Nobody answered." The tactical officer hesitated, then nodded and relayed the message. But then Cole added something else, something that surprised even his own crew. "After that," he said, "offer them a real ceasefire, full surrender, no further attacks. We are not here to become the monsters that destroyed us." His officers looked at him, confusion clear on their faces. "Sir?" the tactical officer asked carefully. Cole's eyes were hard, but his voice was steady. "We fight to survive, not to become murderers. If they surrender, we accept. This is not about killing every Zarn soldier in the galaxy. It's about making sure they, and everyone else, understand something very clearly." He looked at the burning outpost on the screen. Humanity is no longer defenseless. Commander Thrix received the message with shaking claws. Around him, his outpost was in ruins. Fires burned through broken corridors. Half his crew was dead or wounded. The human fleet outside could have destroyed them completely, and yet they were being offered mercy. It made no sense to him. In Zarn military culture, mercy was often seen as weakness. Yet the way this message had been delivered, calm, controlled, absolute, felt like anything but weakness. "Sir," his remaining officer said quietly. "Orders." Thrix looked around at what remained of his command. He thought about his duty to the Zarn Empire, about the pride of his people, about the shame of surrender. Then he thought about his crew, the young soldiers who had trusted him to keep them alive. "Signal surrender," Thrix said quietly. "Tell them we accept the ceasefire." News of the battle spread through Zarn territory within hours, then through Alliance space within days. The reaction was immediate panic. Nobody had expected humanity, a species that had left the Alliance in what everyone assumed was an emotional, foolish decision, to reappear as a serious military power capable of defeating a Zarn outpost with minimal losses. At the Alliance Council chambers on Thranos, the 5 leaders gathered in an emergency session. their earlier confidence completely shattered. "This is not possible," said the Sela leader, staring at reports from Zarn intelligence sources. "Humans have only had space travel for less than 2 centuries. How could they develop this level of military technology in 18 months? Vesa, the Ashani leader, looked troubled. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we underestimated them from the very beginning." General Doruk slammed his hand on the table. "This changes everything. If humans can defeat a Zarn outpost this easily, what happens when they turn their attention toward us?" The room fell silent. Every leader in that chamber understood the same terrible truth. They had betrayed Earth, sacrificed an entire human colony to protect their own peace with the Zarn Empire. And now, that same betrayed species had built a war fleet capable of striking fear into their former enemies. If humanity ever decided to seek revenge against the Alliance itself, would anyone be able to stop them? Back on Earth, celebrations were mixed with solemn remembrance. The victory at Sector 12 was humanity's first true military success since leaving the Alliance, but nobody forgot the cost that had led them to this moment. Prime Minister Diane Okafor addressed the nation once again, her voice carrying both pride and caution. "Today our fleet achieved a victory that many thought impossible," she said. "But let us remember why we built this fleet in the first place. Not for conquest, not for endless war, but to ensure that no human colony ever again suffers the fate of New Haven." She paused, looking directly into the camera with tired but determined eyes. "We have shown the galaxy that humanity will not be sacrificed for anyone else's peace. But now, a harder question remains. What do we do with the strength we have built?" Aboard the Vengeance, Marcus Reyes sat alone in his quarters after the battle, staring at an old photograph of his sister Elena. She was smiling in the photo, standing in front of her first ship before she had ever left for New Haven Colony. He thought about the moment he had destroyed the Alliance scout ship months earlier, and now, leading his squadron against the very empire that had killed her. He had expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even peace. Instead, he felt hollow. A knock came at his door. It was General Voss, who had traveled with the fleet for this first major operation. "You did good work today, Lieutenant," Voss said, stepping into the small room. "Doesn't feel like it should, sir," Marcus admitted quietly. "I thought beating them would make it feel better. Make her death feel, I don't know, worth something." Voss sat down across from him, his old eyes understanding more than words could say. "Revenge never fills the hole grief leaves behind, son. But that's not why we fight anymore, is it?" Marcus looked up. "We fight so nobody else has to lose what you lost," Voss continued. "So no other brother has to sit alone in a room, wondering if winning a battle was supposed to feel different." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his words. "What happens now, sir?" he finally asked. "We beat one outpost, but the Zarn Empire has hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships, and the Alliance, they're the ones who really betrayed us." Voss's expression darkened. "Command believes the Zarn will retaliate soon, and the Alliance Council is likely watching closely, terrified of what we might do next." He stood up, moving toward the door. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. Something tells me this was only the beginning." Far away, in the golden halls of Threnos, the Alliance Council received an urgent transmission from Earth. Ambassador Marcus Webb, still humanity's official representative despite the withdrawal, appeared on their main screen, his expression unreadable. "The Earth government has authorized me to deliver a message," Webb said formally. The 5 council leaders exchanged nervous glances. "Humanity does not seek war with the Alliance," Webb continued. "Our conflict remains with the Zarn Empire, who directly attacked our people. However," he paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make every leader in that chamber uncomfortable. "Earth has not forgotten who allowed that attack to happen. We have not forgotten the documents recovered from New Haven's ashes. The choice of what happens next rests entirely with this council." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Alliance leaders staring at a blank screen, each one thinking the exact same terrifying thought. Humanity was no longer the desperate, pleading species that had once begged for their help. Humanity had become something far more dangerous. a species with nothing left to fear and everything already lost. And somewhere in the depths of space, the human war fleet continued to grow, preparing for a war that would soon reach far beyond the borders of Zarn territory. 6 months after the Battle of Sector 12, the galaxy was a different place. The Zarn Empire, humiliated by their defeat, launched a massive counterattack against human territory. 20 warships descended upon a human mining colony called Redstone, expecting an easy victory against a species they still believed was young and weak. They were wrong. Human defense fleets, hidden in ambush positions using the same stealth technology that had destroyed the Alliance scout ship months earlier, tore through the Zarn attack force in less than an hour. Only 3 Zarn ships escaped, fleeing back to report the devastating loss to their emperor. This became the pattern of the war. Zarn forces attacked, expecting weakness. Human forces answered with precision, speed, and a level of coordination that no Zarn commander could predict or counter. Within 4 months, human fleets had pushed deep into Zarn territory, capturing key shipyards and cutting off supply lines. The once mighty Zarn Empire, an empire that had ruled its region of space for over 1,000 years, found itself on the edge of collapse. On the bridge of the Vengeance, now humanity's flagship, Commander James Cole studied a massive star map showing the current state of the war. Red markers showed captured Zarn territory. Blue markers showed human-controlled space, expanding faster than anyone had predicted. Beside him stood Marcus Reyes, now promoted to fleet captain, commanding an entire battle group of his own. "The Zarn Emperor is requesting a formal peace meeting," reported Sarah Kim, now serving as Cole's chief strategist. "They're offering full reparations, territory concessions, and public acknowledgement of the New Haven massacre." Cole studied the message carefully. Part of him, the part still burning with grief for every human life lost, wanted to refuse. Wanted to keep pushing forward until the Zarn Empire was nothing but memory. But he remembered his promise from Sector 12. "We fight to survive, not to become murderers." "Not. Set up the meeting," Cole said. "But make it clear, this is not a negotiation from a position of weakness. This is us choosing mercy, not being forced into it." Sarah nodded and began preparing the response. Marcus watched his commander carefully. Over the past year, he had learned more from Cole than any military academy could have taught him. Strength without control was just destruction, but strength guided by purpose could become something else entirely. Justice. Meanwhile, on Threnos, the Alliance Council faced a crisis unlike anything in their long history. With the Zarn Empire crumbling under human pressure, other empires across the galaxy began questioning everything they thought they knew about power and strength. Smaller species who had once been afraid to challenge the Alliance now saw an opportunity. If humanity, once considered the weakest member of the Alliance, could defeat a 1,000-year-old empire in less than a year, what did that say about the true strength of the Alliance Council itself? Rebellions began breaking out across Alliance territory. Trade routes that once flowed peacefully now faced constant disruption. The 5 council leaders who had once sat so confidently around their circular table now argued bitterly, each blaming the others for the decision that had led to this chaos. "We should never have allowed the humans to leave in the first place," snapped General Doruk during one heated session. "We should never have sacrificed their colony to protect our peace with the Zarn," Vesa shot back, her patience finally breaking after months of silent guilt. "This entire crisis exists because of that single decision." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Deep down, every leader knew she was right. A new transmission interrupted their argument. It was Ambassador Marcus Webb again, requesting an emergency audience. When his image appeared on the main screen, his expression was calm, controlled, almost gentle, but his words carried the weight of an entire species behind them. "The human government requests a formal meeting between Fleet Commander James Cole and this council," Webb said. "The location and terms will be decided by Earth." The council leaders exchanged worried glances. "For what purpose?" Doruk asked cautiously. Webb's expression didn't change. "To discuss the future of this galaxy." 3 weeks later, a massive human fleet arrived at the edges of Threnos space. Hundreds of warships, more than the Alliance Council had ever seen gathered in one place, filled the darkness of space like a silent storm waiting to break. At the front of this fleet floated the Vengeance, its hull marked with the scars of a dozen battles, a symbol of everything humanity had survived and become. Panic spread through Threnos as sensors detected the approaching fleet. Alliance defense forces scrambled to battle stations, but everyone knew the truth. If the humans had come for war, there would be no stopping them. Commander Cole stood on the bridge, watching the golden planet of Threnos grow larger on his view screen. Beside him stood Marcus Reyes and Sarah Kim, both silent, both understanding the gravity of this moment. "They're hailing us, sir," Sarah reported. "The Council is requesting to know our intentions." Cole took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in this galaxy for generations to come. "Open a channel," he said. "Let's give them their answer." In the great chamber of the Alliance Council, the 5 leaders watched nervously as Commander Cole's image appeared on their main screen. Behind him, through the ship's window, they could see the massive human fleet floating silently in space, weapons visible, but not active. "Commander Cole," Vesa said carefully, her voice betraying the fear that ran through the entire chamber. "We assume you have come to discuss terms." Cole studied their faces for a long moment before speaking. He thought about Elena Reyes, about New Haven Colony, about every family that had lost someone because of a decision made in this very room. "1 year ago," Cole began, his voice steady and calm, "you sacrificed an entire human colony to protect your peace with an empire that saw all of you as nothing more than tools to be used. You knew the attack was coming. You had 3 weeks to warn us. Instead, you chose silence." The council leaders said nothing, unable to meet his gaze. "We could destroy this entire council right now," Cole continued. "Our fleet outnumbers your defenses 10 to 1. Nobody in this galaxy would be able to stop us. Some of my own people believe that's exactly what we should do." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "But that is not why we came." The council leaders looked up, confusion clear on their faces. "We came to offer you a choice," Cole said. "The same choice you never gave us, honesty or consequence." Cole outlined Earth's terms clearly. The Alliance Council would publicly acknowledge the betrayal of New Haven Colony, releasing every document, every communication that proved their complicity in the massacre. They would offer full reparations to the survivors and families of the colony. And most importantly, they would restructure the Alliance itself, giving every member species, no matter how new or how small, equal voice and equal protection. "If you refuse," Cole said, his voice hardening slightly, "we will not attack you directly, but we will make sure every species in this galaxy knows the truth of what happened to New Haven. We will make sure every small, vulnerable world understands exactly what kind of alliance they've joined. And we will build alliances of our own, with species you have ignored, exploited, and betrayed just as you betrayed us." He leaned forward slightly. "Humanity has learned a hard lesson this past year. We will not make the same mistake you made. We will not ignore the suffering of others to protect our own comfort. But we will also never again allow ourselves to be sacrificed for someone else's convenience." Silence filled the chamber. Each council leader understood the true weight of this moment. Their choice now would determine not just the fate of the Alliance, but the future shape of the entire galaxy. General Doruk, the proud Crane warrior who had once dismissed humanity as unimportant, finally spoke. "And if we agree?" he asked quietly. Cole's expression softened, just slightly. "Then we start over," he said. "Not as masters and subjects, not as protectors and expendable pieces, but as equals, working towards something better than what came before." The decision took 3 days of intense deliberation. In the end, faced with the reality of a human war fleet capable of ending their existence and the growing unrest across Alliance territory, the Council agreed to Earth's terms. The truth of New Haven Colony was released to the entire galaxy. Every species learned of the secret deal, the sacrifice, the betrayal that had led to this moment. Public outrage forced sweeping changes throughout Alliance leadership. Smaller species who had long been ignored finally gained equal representation, largely because of humanity's insistence on fair treatment for everyone, not just themselves. The Zarn Empire, weakened by war and abandoned by the alliance that had once protected them, eventually signed a lasting peace treaty with Earth, formally acknowledging their role in the New Haven massacre and agreeing to strict limitations on future military expansion. 1 year later, Marcus Reyes stood on the newly rebuilt memorial site of New Haven Colony. The ashes had long since cleared, replaced now by a peaceful green field and a tall, simple monument bearing the names of every person who had died that terrible day. Elena's name was carved near the top, alongside thousands of others. Beside him stood Commander James Cole, now retired from active fleet duty, serving instead as Earth's first official ambassador to the newly restructured alliance. "She would be proud of you," Cole said, looking at the monument. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes tracing his sister's name. "I used to think winning this war would make the pain go away," he said. "It didn't. But I think it gave her death meaning. Gave all of this meaning." Cole placed a hand on the young captain's shoulder. "That's the best any of us can hope for, son. Making sure the ones we lost didn't die for nothing." They stood together in silence, watching the wind move gently through the tall grass that now covered what had once been a battlefield of fire and death. Far above them, in the quiet darkness of space, the human war fleet continued its patrol, no longer a weapon of vengeance, but a symbol of a promise kept. Humanity had faced betrayal, had burned with grief and rage, and had transformed that pain into something the entire galaxy would never forget. They had not become monsters despite every reason to. They had not sought endless conquest despite having the power to take it. Instead, they had built something rare in the history of any species, a strength guided by purpose, tempered by mercy, and forever shaped by the memory of those they had lost. The narrator's voice would close the story here, calm but powerful. The galaxy learned one thing that day: humanity forgives once, never twice. And when they rise from the ashes of betrayal, they rise not as villains, but as guardians who will never again let the innocent be sacrificed for someone else's peace. The end.